Well, Heidi was only 4 years old when that happened. And so here we are years later, and I was scheduled to go down to Daytona, and a friend of mine who I grew up with in Jacksonville, Florida, he's a pastor. He said, my brother-in-law wants to have you do a program like we're doing here with all your clients, his clients and everything, and I want him to experience what you do in a church setting. I said, okay, sure. He said, they want you to play at his church. I said, okay. And so, he got in trouble with trying to get everybody's taxes out. He said, Doyle, it's just not possible to do this right now, and I'll have you back later, I promise, but he said, I'll pay your fee or whatever. I said, well, don't worry about that. Don't you want me to play at the church? And he said, yeah, I'll give you your fee and let that be it. Well, I called the church, and they said, yeah, we heard you might be coming. Just what is it that you do? And I'm going, well, I'm a guitar player. Well, okay, what else? Are you a contemporary Christian worship leader? I said, no. And, well, how could you have ever played with Paul Baloche and Chris Tomlin and all these people? I know all those guys, but I've been around them in programs, but I think the reason I was on those programs is because I do something different than they do. Sure. Well, we just don't think it's right for our church, especially on Palm Sunday. And instead of letting that get me down and ruin my confidence, I got me a cup of coffee and grabbed my phone and my calendar and walked outside, and I said, Lord, you must have a better idea. You must have a better idea. And so I prayed about it for a moment, and I remembered this guy said, if you ever need to come to one of the churches in our area that we're kind of over, let me know. And I usually don't do that, but I said, hey, and I'm calling you because I had a cancellation. Within minutes, the pastor of this church called, we'd love to have you here, Doyle. And it wasn't very far, so my friend's brother-in-law and sister-in-law came. They came over to the church, just like I promised would do that. And so I'm at this church setting up, and it's a big church. And this lady walked up to the sound guy, and she just said something kind of funny. She had these big, thick glasses on. And I'm thinking, no, that couldn't be. This was the same area, but this is a big church. That was a little small church, And so I just asked the sound guy, I said, who is that lady? Oh, her name is Sue. And I thought, well, that sounds familiar. And I said, well, how long has she been coming here? He said, all of her life. And I'm thinking, well, this church isn't that old. He said, well, we used to be a small church on the other side of town.
Oh, wow.
I said, did they have a little center aisle and two little sections and double doors in the back? And he said, yes. I'm thinking, I didn't say anything. He says, Doyle, I know your story. There might be 2 or 3 of us that know the White Rose story. Mm-hmm. I said, is that the White Rose lady? And they said, it is.
Wow.
That's her. I said, well, I didn't know if she really existed or if she was an angel, 'cause I kept waiting on her to walk out. And is that what angel? Yeah, but she didn't. And so when I got away, I texted and called my family. Heidi was in New York with her family on vacation. She said, Dad, I would give anything if I could have been there. I said, well, we're going to make that happen. So about 3 weeks later was Mother's Day. And so I took her after church and went back to that place. And she went, back in that day, you couldn't just go to a store and buy a White Rose. You had to order them. It was rare that we had a White Rose. Yeah. And like I said, it came from her garden. But Heidi went to Publix, a store over there. And when she met her, she presented her with a White Rose. It was just a beautiful, beautiful time. And then of all things, I don't know if you've ever seen my album, Treasures of the Spirit. It's a CD I did. And there's a picture of a rose on there. It's sort of a different looking, very French, because Pierre Matisse, the grandson of Henri Matisse, heard about our meeting her, and he said, we want to be there. And so we invited him out for dinner. And Henri or Pierre Matisse was also there, and we ended up using his rendition of he called it White Rose for Heidi, on the cover of that album, and their White Roses played all through it. Anyway, Heidi called me, a year or so later, because they became fierce friends, and Heidi keeps her in her home a lot of times around Christmas and things. She takes her shopping, and so they talk every week. They have their Saturday morning phone call. But Heidi called me. She said, "Dad, I know it's a long shot, but if you're not on the show, I know it's hard to get on the Opry." But I said, "What are you talking about, Heidi? Can you get us a ticket? They're all sold out." She said, "I want Sue to. It's her 75th birthday."
Pull some strings.
Yeah, pardon the pun there, pull some strings. And so I said, "Well, let me work on it." So I contacted them, and I said, "Would you guys think about," and I told them the story. I said, "Doyle, we love your story. We know it, and we'd love to have her. Yeah, you're on the show." And
Wow.
so they put me on the show and featured me, in fact. And I told that story. I said, well, it's amazing how things go full circle. I said, Heidi's here. And it's a white rose for Heidi. And they all cheered and everything. I said, well, it even goes further. Here's the white rose lady. And today she is 75. And she was that day. And they went crazy. I mean, I'd never heard. And I prayed that God would use that story and just really touch those people at the Opry. But it was way beyond what I thought, you know. In fact, I told my mom, and she said, yeah, we just be in agreement the Lord would touch some people there. I said, no, Mama, agree with me. God's going to touch every person in that house, and even on XM radio, people that listened all over the world. One of my pastor friends was in Alabama. He said, I heard it on the radio, on XM. I had to pull over because the Spirit of God was so strong. He said, I began to weep, you know. So it's amazing how God can use a little girl and a little legally blind lady, autistic, and how that story can go around the world and has touched so many people.